Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for attending this afternoon's session. I appreciate it's been a long day, so hopefully we'll discuss some contentious ideas and we can argue about them afterwards. I'm going to talk to you about 3 IT principles for decision making today: NoDev, NoOps, and NoIT. Some of you might be familiar with the term NoOps. In gratitude to Typo3 allowing me to speak at this event, I've put the 3 IT principles there, so that is a reference to Typo3. I'm going to apply these principles to the free and open source software, and I'm going to argue the case to create something new, community software, which will be distinguished from free and open source software, as we'll describe. Before I jump into the discussion, I would like to redefine the term computer. I spent about half an hour going through the various definitions of computer online, and while there was a huge emphasis on calculation, I couldn't find a single definition that actually referred to automation, which is surprising because that's pretty much what I've used computers for all my life. So I want to redefine a computer as any device or machine, physical or virtual, that increases productivity by automating cognitive and algorithmic processes. You may well disagree with that. It's not a great definition, but I think it's better than the ones that I've found so far. And if you bear that in mind while we go through this talk, hopefully it will come together at the end. Okay, so what are the benefits of automation, specifically for NoOps? NoOps is a term that refers to no operations. I'm sure some of you are aware of DevOps. It's made a huge impact in the way applications are moved from development into production. It's streamlined the entire process. And I think a lot of us were doing DevOps before it was called DevOps. Taking that to its logical extreme, ultimately, I think you end up in a situation where there is no ops at all, because it's fully automated away. There will be a requirement human beings to exercise judgment, but not necessarily carrying out the functions of operations. Automation, in terms of no-ops, key benefit is that it reduces the chances of errors. Statistically speaking, human beings are more error prone. They will make more mistakes. It's not a question of when, it's a question of, not a question of if, more a question of when those mistakes will happen. The greater the degree of tested automation that you can deploy into your operations, the fewer the chances of something going wrong. And I've been there myself. I did third line support for the UK payments infrastructure, and I was that man that deleted a directory that shouldn't have been done in production and had to spend 6 hours rebuilding a directory structure. So I think all of us are guilty of it. Sorry, by the way, I'm going to be using publicly available memes for all of my slide deck. So if any of these pictures offend anyone, I apologize in advance, but they're all publicly available. So NoOps, humans executing repetitive cognitive and algorithmic processes are slower than computers. Again, I think generally for the kind of repetitive tasks that we carry out in operations, computers can do them a damn sight more quickly and efficiently than human beings. Something that's growing more and more important is the need for security. Ultimately, human beings can be blackmailed, they can be coerced into compromising the security of your enterprise. Again, in operational roles, a lot of the security holes are because of the people. They map directly onto insiders within an organization, disgruntled employees, or in some cases, criminal elements actually blackmailing your operations staff. So again, automating those elements of operations improves security. And manual intervention is costly. What human beings do well, that sits outside of what computers do, is judgment. From my perspective, humans bring judgment to a process, and as far as I can see, computers aren't going to substitute that. But a broad range of operational tasks, they can easily be replaced with automated machines and artificial intelligence, and it should be a lot more economic for the enterprise. So distilling, that's one section of NoOps, it's automation. Ultimately, NoOps is about eliminating the dependencies between application and operations team, for me. And I have seen this work, and I've seen it work in some smaller organizations and some quite large ones. I'm not saying we get rid of the operational staff entirely. What I'm saying is the governance around the application should sit with the application team, and the operations team can look after the platform. What happens all too often, and I've seen this throughout my career, an operations team that has no idea what applications are being deployed onto their platform is held accountable for supporting that application. It's a pretty appalling model, and the general result of that model is no changes occur in production. There's pushback on changes, you have lengthy release cycles, because obviously the operations team view change with a huge amount of caution, because it risks their platform, and their pay is directly related to their performance of the applications running on those platforms. What we're talking about here is shifting the accountability back to the application team with a commensurate amount of flexibility in terms of the roles that the application team take for operating those applications in production. Moving on to the next principle, NoDev. I want to be clear about this. If you're a company that's writing software or selling hardware, and that's what you do as your primary kind of business objective, then you're in the business of IT. But if you're, for example, a bank, you're in the business of financial services. You're not in the business of IT. And every line of code that you write has a security cost, has a maintenance cost, has to be deployed on some infrastructure somewhere. So dabbling into development when it's not actually your business's core objective is, I see this commonly, and for me it's a complete waste of resources. Often you find that well-established and old organizations, by old I mean, let's say older than 10 years, with developed IT departments, take a certain pride in reproducing commodity IT, which is really an appalling waste of resources, in my opinion. I've seen, for example, databases being written inside banks, content management systems being rewritten and created. There was a time when these systems didn't exist and it was justified for an IT team to create them. But actually now, the process for selecting technology should be, can we use something off the cloud? Can we buy something off the shelf? Can we use some open source software? Or do we have to write it? Those questions just aren't asked often enough. If you really have to engage in development, pick your battles. Make sure that you're writing applications that can demonstrably be and unequivocally demonstrate generation of value. So what kinds of things should you be developing? Well, for me, it's anything related to user experience. If there's a gap and you can't find software for it, fine. Spend some money on development, get those resources. User experience leads to revenue generation, leads to value generation. If you're trying to redirect resources to develop an application that meets a regulator's demand on your business, that is an appalling waste of resource, in my opinion, because it's the cost of doing business, and you're writing code to deal with something that isn't going to generate any value for your business at all, or for the enterprise, or for your customers. What you should be doing in that kind of situation is attempting to work with other people, or maybe the open source community, to distribute the cost of the regulation that's being placed upon your organization, and creating a piece of software that can be shared amongst the community. These are just my opinions, by the way. They're not rules to be religiously followed. Finally, NoIT. Eliminate systems that demand human attention. I see this across the fintech sector. I get bombarded throughout the day with systems that tell me I need to approve something, that tell me I need to register something, tell me I need to return something. All of these are just distractions from work. The data exists in organizations to facilitate kind of zero experience deployment of these administrative systems. The best user experience for me in dealing with an administrative system is not experiencing it at all. Again, eliminating duplication, I think, is an obvious one, but it just astounds me, especially in large organizations, how much duplication there is in IT, how much proprietary duplication there is in IT. I think that there is definitely some duplication in terms of the open source community, but I think it's healthy competition. A bit contentious. Innovative appropriation is the most valuable form of innovation. What I mean by this is innovation is costly for the enterprise. A lot of large organizations set up innovation teams. They fund them with hundreds of thousands or millions of euros. These teams then take on the burden of innovation because they've been told to, and generally don't develop much in the way of innovation. What we should be doing instead is having an innovative strategy of identifying innovation that occurs in the free market, outside of the organization, and ensuring that we can adopt that innovation into our enterprise and maximize the value from it. That's something that I've done in the past. Leave the innovation to the free market. Let your enterprise focus on selecting the best innovation that's available rather than attempting to innovate IT, if you're not in the business of IT. Okay, so I want to move to applying these principles to open source. And I've been using open source for a long time. I'm a huge advocate of open source. But when you work inside a large enterprise, open source can be, well, certainly for us at the moment, security is a huge deal in terms of scanning code that you don't control and finding vulnerabilities, who's going to fix them, finding libraries that have been out of use for decades in some cases, in the worst instances, that are openly available. So open source in and of itself is not something anyone within an enterprise would necessarily select if there's commercial pressures on them, necessarily select as opposed to a proprietary piece of software. What would be wonderful is if there was a way of differentiating well-provisioned, commercially viable open source projects, if there was a way of distinguishing them from a hobbyist checking code into GitHub. Because when you mention open source to a lot of senior managers, that's exactly what they're imagining. Just simply not commercially viable or sustainable. what I'm trying to move towards, I think, is to distinguish community software from open source. It is to change the focus. Community software, which operates commercially and is commercially viable, generates value for the community. Open source, I think, to a large extent, was initiated as in terms of a gift culture. You gift code by making it open source, effectively giving it away for free, mostly to other developers, and they give you a gift back by enhancing that code and allowing anyone else to reuse it. For community software, we're not just talking about developers, we're talking about the entire ecosystem. So all of the stakeholders that are involved in an open source software project or a community source software project. Great example is actually Typo3. You have associations, you have code contributors, you have a huge number of customers and clients around the world. Great variance in the size and diversity of your entire community. That's a real strength. And if we were doing an RFP for, let's say, a CMS system, and something landed on my desk saying this is community software, and I have something that's open source, how many senior managers do you think will immediately react to the open source solution negatively? I've seen it happen. Whereas community source, if we can make the brand and if we can get the right people behind it, could distinguish itself from the rest of the open source pack. So finally, almost finally, penultimately, just something I'll read out to you on this one. Whilst it can be said that all community software is free and open source, not all free and open source software is community software. This definition has been chosen to distinguish community software from existing FOSS, emphasizing its value first and foremost, which is derived from the commercial viability of the solution providers, the software vendors which develop, maintain, and distribute it. And actually, it should say the strength of the community that supports and defines that software. This is just something that my brother threw in, who's a big advocate. Code without community is like freedom without morality, or technology without ethics, at best meaningless, or at worst, damn right dangerous. So I've gone through very quickly here to take 3 principles of IT decision making, which I use on a day-to-day basis, and I know other people are beginning to use them as well. I've applied those principles to the selection of open source software, and what I'm arguing for now is to actually create a differentiation between community software and open source software in order to enable the successful projects that are commercially viable to have a better chance of penetrating markets. I think that's all. Any questions?
Seems like no questions, Hus.
I did run through it quite quickly. I do apologize.
Hard to swallow, Olivier.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Maybe a statement or
A statement.
an idea.
There's only half an hour left.
I'm going to be short on that. Thanks a lot, Hussein, for joining us. I think we're really on the brink to understand the value of open source if we take the community into account. And I'm very happy to see that those thoughts are finally starting to arrive at places where I haven't thought they would arrive. I mean, we've been fighting years and years and years. And 15 years ago, when we started to sell Typo3 as a community software, we went through this licensing idea, and it doesn't cost anything at all. And in those 15 years, we learned a lot. Isn't that actually with the tool, we create a lot of value and a lot of of services around it for the customers. And I really like now the point that you're making is that with the customers, this community, this software gets to the right point. So I really appreciate you talking here and giving us insights into those ideas.
Certainly, you know, I select software that's part of my role in my job. And I've seen this over and over again when open source, simply because it's called open source, creates an image in the minds of people that it's a bunch of hackers putting rubbish code into GitHub, which it isn't. And I know that there are more enlightened views, but to me it seems like if we shift the emphasis to the community, that's a real value proposition for any business.
Are there more questions or statements? There is one. It's okay if I start here?
Sorry. Yeah, just a short one. You say you select software, and you mentioned the community aspect. What exactly are you, what are the differentiations there? I mean, what are the community qualities you're looking for, and how do you decide on them?
That's an excellent question. Commercial viability. So if there's free software that's available, who's supporting it? Support is a huge deal for us. Whenever we're selecting software, we need to know that if there's something wrong with it in production or wherever, that there's a swift response, and that response actually meets our service level agreements. When there's a strong community around software, whether that community is, you know, paid professionals or enthusiastic non-profit workers, whatever it is, the size of the community and the vibrance of that community is something that we would look at in order to make sure that it can be serviced properly. Beyond that, the vitality of the community, I think, is completely linked with innovation as well as the size of that community. So those are becoming more and more important for us. I think the model of having a centralized innovation team in a large organization, I don't think that's going to last long, where all the innovation is supposed to come from. So actually a diverse community that's very alive and passionate about what they do, I think is a great area for innovation, and we look at those software thinking our future is probably going to be safer if we invest capital and time and effort into those software projects.
There's one more question here.
We were talking about, I think, two types of open source software. There's the lone hacker and the community-driven software. But there is another one, this kind of for open software, but it's driven by companies.
Yeah.
An old example would be MySQL, which is not really open source. I think no developer ever contributed code outside of the company itself, or Magento, Sugar CRM, and the likes. Would you count them, if you're selecting software, as open source, or is it just another commercial available software?
I would certainly consider those as being more viable. If I need to select an operating system and I go with Red Hat because they're an established organization, paid professionals, and generally quite a vital community, I would definitely put those through an RFP process in terms of selection. I would consider that totally valid. As a business, frankly, I don't care if it's open or not. What I care about is the bottom line and my strategic objectives. Now, if community software, open source, or a hacker can deliver that bottom line, that's fine. We'll pursue that. We'll pursue our bottom line.
More questions or statements? No. Thank you, Hussein.
Thank you. Cheers.
We're going to continue here in around 15 minutes.